Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back for another live stream. Welcome to live stream 4. I'm pretty sure I got that number right. So this live stream is extra special because I have one of our very good friends, one of our super backers for Potato Pirates, and that's none other than Peter Membrey. So, hey, Peter, how are you?
Hey guys, I'm doing great. It's really awesome to
Awesome.
be here. Really excited.
Yeah, no, so are we. So Peter, for those of you who don't know, is the chief architect of ExpressVPN and also a super backer of Potato Pirates. He's actually been our backer for all our games, since 2017 when we launched our first game all the way through to our third game, Battle Chips. And in fact, when we launched Battle Chips, in I think in the span of about 10 minutes, we had the highest tier, picked up, which was 1111 Singapore dollars, so $1,111. And I was so surprised. So I actually clicked into that order and I was like, Peter Membry, this name looks familiar. So I just did some snooping and I saw that Peter actually was one of the proud owners of the massive Potato King plushies from the first game. Peter, do you still have that plushie?
I do. I should have taken a picture of it. I mean, at the time I got it, it was literally bigger than my son. So it was on the bed a lot. So like he would just be grabbing it and taking it around and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think we all have a very close bond to it, and even in our office, we even have like the first ever prototype we made, and we all like still find that that's the cutest. But Peter, it's so awesome that someone like you firstly found this like unknown project called Potato Pirates like back 4 or 5 years ago, and I really appreciate the fact that you trusted enough to back it, and not just that, but like you stayed with us throughout our 3 games and our journey, and that's just so awesome. And now I've gotten to know you, and like you're such a stellar guy to be with. But I just want to ask you, like, what got you to be one of the top tier backers for our first game, and then stay through with us, till our latest project.
I think it was mostly due to the novelty factor. Like it was something completely new. Everybody is talking about how important STEM is, how you need to know how to code, how this is going to change the world, how it's now a key part of literacy. But all the stuff that I've seen kind of, centers on a screen, and it's either interacting with like another computer model, or you're interacting with some sort of like narrative, but it's not really very socially engaging, and it's not something you can generally do with other people. It's usually quite like an insular sort of
Exactly.
activity. Now, what I really liked about the Potato Pirates was that it takes you away from the screen, which is great.
Yeah.
And it gets you playing with other people. So again, you got more of a social aspect to it. But what's really interesting about it is that it's also like self-leveling. So one of the really nice things about it is the rules are simple, and as a kid, if you pick it up, you can learn the rules pretty quickly. But even if you're an expert programmer, you're still limited by the same, world rules as everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you don't get any special advantage, but
Yeah.
you can also enjoy the game. And I think that's really important. Where if you have people at different levels, it's very hard to keep everybody engaged. Um, when you're trying to handle like learner diversity in that sense, how
Yeah.
do you keep like a kid who's never seen this before engaged, but also keep the adults who've been doing this for 20 years engaged?
Hmm.
And it does an amazing job of that.
Yeah. Thanks. I think you got like all our objectives, when we started out. And in fact, like, so our company Kodomo, we started like 6 years ago, and we started running, these training programs and workshops for kids and in schools, and as enrichment classes. And this was like this huge gap that we saw. Like, it's difficult to cater to learner diversity, and you don't want to be exacerbating that problem of like too much screen time for kids as well. So that's really what we were trying to achieve with that. And like, we didn't know that we were going to end up creating a series of board games, but we just knew that we wanted to make computer science fun, offline and available to anyone, right? So we just wanted to democratize that, and that's really what we ended up doing. And yeah, and that's great that you felt that same way. So what did you feel between like the first and second? So you haven't had a chance to play the third game yet, sadly, but what did you
Yeah.
feel between the first original Potato Pirates game and the Sputnik game? How do you compare them?
Um, they're quite different, and I think that's actually one of the nice things about it. Often when you see these things, like you have version 2 comes out and it kind of supplants version 1, and everybody wants to do version 2.
Mm-hmm.
But with this, they're still unique products, and they do unique things, so you can still enjoy one whilst learning the other. And one doesn't take away from the other. I mean, that's always a challenge as well, right? When you release these different types of games, and some people like this game and some people like that game, and now you've got 3 or 4 different communities that you're trying to balance.
Mm-hmm.
With this, you've got the original game, which does exactly what it says it does, but you have a new game as well that you can play that takes things in a different direction, lets you get deeper into it. With the original game, the leveling was actually really nice. It covered all the basic stuff,
Yeah.
but didn't go into any real depth, because it wasn't meant to. It was just meant to get these concepts across.
Precisely.
And because it kind of held back, it just made it much more accessible for people who weren't used to this style of thinking. Whereas with Spudnet, you have a lot more freedom to go deeper into more technical topics, and not worry that you're leaving people behind. So you still have something for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess the another big difference that we felt like as creators and as designers was the fact that the second game was so much more conceptual, and that's always a challenge, right? Because in the first game there's there are clear learning outcomes and objectives, where the second game, as you said, like does definitely go into a lot more depth and a lot more direction, but it's also very conceptual, right? So that's also, I guess, like a good and bad thing in a way.
I think it's a good thing. I mean, it's certainly true that for some people they may get left behind a little, or they may have to do a bit more catching up. And everybody, of course, learns at different rates, and especially when you've got various different subtopics in there, you might be strong at one but not quite get the other. But I think that's actually a good thing, because when you're playing the game and you're coming up against these things and you're trying to battle against them, that's kind of where the thinking comes into it, right? So it's a very active learning style. So rather than just sitting there writing down notes or watching a video or having a lecture, you're actively trying to use this technique for real. And these things are hard, and the reason for that is these things are hard, right?
Yeah.
So it gives you that sort of flexibility to stretch, but it also means the game can last longer. So one of the challenges with the original was the game could maybe last only a few minutes, because you've only got a small selection of potatoes, and in the space of 2 minutes you could be out of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with the second game, there's a lot more scope in there. It's more of an afternoon game rather than a quick game whilst you're waiting for something else.
Exactly. And I think that was another thing that we knew that we had to do, being an educational product, an educational game, and really trying to push the envelope for, how we can democratize computer science. For us, it was really about introducing a game that was more educational friendly and not so much take that. Because I've seen so many kids cry during when they're playing Potato Pirates, and that's something we also tried to address with a co-op mode, which we introduced in Enter the Spotnet. So did you actually ever get to try the co-op mode?
I didn't get to try the co-op mode, so I really should do that.
Well, it is the better mode, because I'm obviously inclined to say that because I was the main designer for the co-op mode, whereas we had another lead designer, Wayne, who did the competitive mode. So my view is biased, but you should definitely give it a go. But on that note, actually, Peter, who do you find yourself usually playing this game with? Like, in what kind of settings have you actually tried this game out?
So mostly I've played with my family. So I got Caden, who's 11, so he was, coming up to like about 9 when I first started playing this. Xander's much smaller; he's only 4, so he hasn't really engaged much with this yet. But we've got it on standby, so he just basically played with the plushie and let us get on with things. But I see this actually going quite a bit further than that now. So I've talked to friends at the ExpressVPN office, and they're like, "Well, this looks really cool. Like, can anybody play this game?" So just seeing the game itself has got people interested in knowing about it, because they're saying, "Well, I'm if perhaps they're like particularly in product or they're in marketing, they don't have like an engineering background. Like, well, is it too late for me to learn this stuff? Can I play this stuff?" And the answer is yeah, the stuff's please do. And what's great is that even a short game can give you a lot of insight very, very quickly. I'm also hoping that we can potentially get it to some schools here as well, and try and combine the study English plus STEM, try and get that as more of a cohesion going. And although I think it's nice that we don't want kids to cry, obviously, when they're playing the game. But one thing that actually was really nice about the original game was that win or lose, it was very clear. And you had that sense of achievement.
Exactly.
So I know when I was playing with my eldest, I think there was a cycle like 4 different denies before I finally lost that particular battle. And the excitement, because you know that you can lose at any time.
Yeah.
Right? You're very strategic about these potatoes, and you're very strategic about these cards. Right?
Exactly.
You don't want to waste them, but if you don't use them, you might not get the chance to. So that sort of style of thinking, like not just being competitive, but to realize that there's something on the line. It's one of the things you always see when people would first start doing either, say, like forex trading or stock trading. You always get like a free trial account with like $500,000 of fake money, and people do and people do great with that. And then they go into live, and even though they're only playing with pennies, they're selling when they shouldn't be, and they're buying when they shouldn't. The whole, now there's something on the line, even if it's only pennies to the dollar. People are very, very different. So having that little edge is actually, I think, really useful, because again, you have this in life, right? For better or for worse. And just being aware of this sort of environment, and not say being thriving in it, but being comfortable in it, like realizing that that's a normal thing. People do get nervous. There are things online. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. That's just the game we play. Exactly. So I think it's also quite a nice way of introducing that. And frankly, it's fun, stealing everybody else's potatoes.
Yeah. Well, those are real life lessons, school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
So on that note, actually, I want to know what got you into computer science. So like the reason why this is something I want to get into is because I learned how to code pretty late in life. I learned how to code in university, and when I looked around me, all my friends just fizzled out and gave up because it was just so difficult. And it's not really that difficult, because the logic of computer science is rudimentary, right? And that's what is I guess emulated in Potato Pirates, because any kid can understand that, right? It's something you use in everyday life, right? So if it's raining, take an umbrella. If it's not, don't, right? That kind of thing. And it's the syntax that really puts people off, and you have to grapple with the syntax in order to really get to the bottom of it and embrace the logic. And that's what we did in Potato Pirates. So and the reason, I think that's the reason we took this approach to decouple these two things, was because that's where me, in my personal journey of learning computer science as well, which resonates with a lot of people I know, is the main, I guess, hurdle that people have to cross. So how was it like for you, and how old or young did you start?
So I actually started coding when I was 8. And that was more due to I'd finally got a nice computer for Christmas. It was the Commodore 64,
Oh, wow.
And pretty much all the games are loaded by tape.
Yeah.
But the tape decks were the cheapest, nastiest things. And it would load like 10 tapes and it was back to the shop to fix it. And so all I really had was this computer and the manual. And I also had a set of magazines that my granddad had bought or subscribed to, like probably the previous decade. And this is going back when you would get a magazine that would talk about computing, and then you'd have examples for like the C64 and the Spectrum, because they're all completely different. It was a very like heterogeneous environment with all this stuff that was just kind of going on. And I kind of learned to program because I had no choice. Otherwise, I had nothing to do with this nice shiny computer. But what I think is interesting, like you were saying about the syntax being a challenge, just briefly jumping to that point, the languages that most things are based on, that are more familiar these days, are based on C. So if you're using like .NET or C# or Java and so on. But those languages were designed in the 60s and 70s, when the way you'd interface was often via, potentially punch cards or really interesting line editors that unfortunately we don't have to deal with these days. So there's a lot of legacy coming from that. And I found this when I started doing Erlang development, which is a very nice platform for highly scalable, highly robust systems. Is that language was designed from Prolog, the same syntax. And one of the things that made Erlang really difficult was it looked so different from what I was used to. And it was just the syntax that got me. If you look at Elixir today, which is basically a modern version of Erlang that's been kind of tweaked, it looks like Ruby. And people can pick that up easily because it works and looks like Ruby. Show them the Erlang, which is exactly the same thing, but just structured in a weird way. And people easily get lost. So I think for a lot of people, when they learn this all at once, it's a lot to take in.
Oh yeah.
And we're kind of told, right, that computers are hard. It's complicated. And there's maths, there's all this stuff, and I mean, my maths is honestly atrocious. But I can still code. It's all good.
And there's a prejudice, right? Like like you said, like you expect it to be hard, and there's also this other, I guess, stereotype that you need to be good at math in order to do computer science.
Yeah, and part of that, I think, is computers are a lot simpler than people think, and that's often why people get lost or get caught out, is because they're expecting it to be so much more that when you actually show them what it is, they're like, well, where's the magic? What's happening behind the scenes? And one of the things I found interesting is, as I've kind of like dug deeper into the layers of the different languages and what they do, even the most advanced thing that you can do from a programming language, if you kind of follow the trail back, it's just code, right? The people who wrote that used the same tools that you used. There's nothing actually that special about it. And once people kind of get comfortable with the idea that it's just logic, it's just exactly what it looks like, there is no hidden knowledge behind it. It is all there is, and you just kind of piece these things together.
Exactly.
People just have a lot more fun with it. But you're right, like it's very hard. In fact, like if you were teaching something like say Java or C at university, and that's your first language, there's so much stuff that you have to know in advance in order to do the most basic, simple things. And the things that you need to know in advance have absolutely nothing to do with the things that you actually want to do, right? So if you just want to, add two numbers together and print them, cool. But now you have to know about compilers, you have to know about include headers and all this other stuff that goes with it. And that detracts from what you're actually trying to learn. So where Potato Pirates really helps out here is it takes those concepts and kind of abstracts them from how they're actually done, right? You take it back to the concepts. And then you can learn in a format of a game. And then when you go back to your programming language of choice, you start to recognize the same things that you're playing with. You start to recognize the loops. You recognize the multipliers. And you start to realize, well, they're actually the same thing. There really is nothing different between the two.
It's like learning a language, right? And like when you see things that you've seen before, you're like, oh, I can make sense of it because like It's like putting a jigsaw piece together, right?
Yeah, and I think one area this is actually quite interesting is they always say that kids learn languages better and faster than adults, and it's kind of thought now that that's actually not necessarily the case. It's just that when kids go and learn your language, they actually use it, and they use it immediately, right? As soon as they go a new place, they meet some new friends, and they point at the football or the bike. That conversation almost starts immediately. They're in a few seconds going to know the word for bike or football, and they immediately start using it.
Exactly.
Whereas as adults, when we go somewhere, we tend to get help, right? We get someone to help us call a plumber. Or we have these crutches, and we just don't use it as much. And what's really interesting about that is we actually have this huge advantage. I think it's Chris Lonsdale who talks a lot about this in his book. I think it's the third year. I haven't read it for a while, but he has just pointed out that if you're going to say like a bathroom in an airport, and you're going to wash your hands and you can't find the taps, like there must be a way to turn on the tap, right? There has to be, because it's a tap, right? There has to be a way to open the door. The door handle may not be obvious, but it's a door. It opens. So you have all this conceptual knowledge that you could apply to these other situations, because they have to be there. That's just how these things are. And so again, with with the Potato Pirates, like you get to play in this kind of separate world where you can just focus on those things. But when you come back to language, like, well, I know there must be a way of comparing these two things because that's how this works, and there must be a way of doing a loop. And you start to see these kind of patterns and constructs. So you might write your loop in, say, Python, and you go, well, that's not quite what I want, but I know it must be here because that's one of the key things. And so you can start looking for that missing piece, because that missing piece must be there somewhere.
Yeah, so just like giving you sort of an intuition of like what to look for, and that's the only way to find. Like you need to know what you're looking for in order to find it, right? And just building that intuition, I guess, into people. So let's take a step back from all this technical talk. So so for those of you who are just joining us, this is Peter Membrey. He's our superbacker, and he is also the one who got to name Parrot the Carrot. So we have a new we have a new character in the series, and this character appears in battleships in the new game, and it's also available as a plushie, and super cute. I love it. So we just kept going back and forth in the office, whether it's going to be Parrot the Carrot or Carrot the Parrot. So because we were completely unable to make a decision, and we were just at loggerheads. So we said, you know what? Let's just let the backers decide, and we'll let our super backer decide. So Peter, why don't you tell them your choice?
So I actually went for Parrot the Carrot. And for me, it had to be that way, right? We've got these cute potatoes. Like the parrot has to be a carrot. It's got to fit in, right? You've got potatoes. You have, all the vegetables together. Like you can't have potatoes and no carrots. And yeah, for me, it's that simple. It just
that's it.
It just had to be this way.
Yeah, you can't have potatoes without carrots. Full stop.
But the funny thing is, like, if everyone says now quickly, oh well, was it like Carrot the Parrot or Parrot the Carrot? I'm like, well, which one was it? And it's quite easy, even having to decided to get confused and get caught out by it.
Yeah, I managed to fool Peter I managed to fool him into thinking that he actually said Carrot the Parrot.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's quite possible that I did say.
Well, we have a lot of jokes in the chat going on about potatoes. So hopefully all of you can now switch gears into making carrot-related jokes. All right. So Peter, tell us a little bit about like what you do at ExpressVPN.
So at the moment, I'm the chief architect there, which means I look at what we're building and how we're building it, and try and keep the focus on the key things that we want to create. So things like privacy, security, and basically things like online safety and stuff like that. So my most recent project has been Lightway, which is our latest like VPN protocol. We designed it from scratch to basically specifically hit the needs of our customers. So whereas for a lot of these things, people have taken stuff off the shelf and then adapted it, we actually, went from scratch and said, okay, well, what do we need as an operator to provide, a high quality service that actually delivers what we say we're delivering, but how do you also support things that our customers are going to want? And that's really key at the moment, because the way people use the internet, and particularly VPN technology, has changed massively in the last 10 years. Like 10 years ago, if you're using a VPN, you had a desktop on your desk, everything was wired, and everything was kind of static. Whereas today, you want to use it on your mobile phone, so you're constantly going from, say, Wi-Fi to 5G to 4G back to Wi-Fi again, and you don't want to constantly, every time you pick up your phone, wait a few seconds for the VPN to come back, or you're getting out of the elevator. If you've ordered like an Uber and you get in the elevator, you want it to come back online extremely quickly when you get out.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this whole different way of looking at what a VPN needs to do, and how can you build it so that it's, as much as possible, it's invisible to people using it. So what we really want to avoid is people like realizing they're on a VPN effectively. Ideally, they should just turn it on and everything should just work as normal.
Right.
Doesn't always happen that way, but we've taken a lot of steps in this design, to try and support that approach.
Yeah.
And we've been pretty happy with it.
Mm-hmm.
We have other stuff coming up as well to try to add to that.
Yeah.
But really, I think the mobile experience is pretty unique.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And again, it's less. Again, it has its kind of parallels with the Potato Pirates, because like we put in everything that we needed, but nothing that we didn't. We had a very clear idea of what this should look like and what was important, and a lot of that was not so much what do I put in, but what do I deliberately leave out, right? Like what things can I get away with? What stuff what's just extra baggage? What makes things more complicated?
I think that's a very common issue with product design and product development, right? Because it's human tendency to try and feature pack and feature overload, but sometimes less is really more.
Yeah, and it also makes things much simpler from a whole range of angles as well, right? So when there's less code in there, there's less things that can go wrong. When you're focusing on one particular area, again, you don't have all these extra things that you're worried about. You can kind of focus. So it gave us, I think, a significant edge in that we were able to create something that was really what people wanted, and it wasn't adapted to try and make that stuff work. We took it from the ground up, and then thought for every single decision basically, and every great idea that came up, it was like, cool, that's a fantastic idea, but do we need it? Like, will that really benefit people? Like, what's the trade-offs?
Exactly.
So we set on something that was fairly minimalistic, but was able to deliver across the board. So
my first experience or first encounter with ExpressVPN was when I landed in China, probably for the first time, and this is about 2014 or 15, and I landed at the airport, and then I realized I was crippled because I couldn't do anything, right? Because Facebook, WhatsApp, and my primary email, even my work email, is on Google Cloud. So I was just crippled, and I was like, oh. And a lot of actually the VPNs which promise to work in China don't actually do the job. And for me, ExpressVPN was very impressive because it worked flawlessly, and I was like, yeah, this is the one, right? So that was my first encounter with ExpressVPN. But my question to you is, should everyone be using a VPN?
I think so, and it's not for the usual reasons that most people will give. I mean, most people say, okay, well, it's the modern world and you need to protect yourself against all these things. But realistically, the modern world is just very different, right? And more often than not, we're the product. So Facebook, I mean, they spend astronomical sums of money every month powering that infrastructure to run Facebook, but the members don't pay anything. So someone is paying for this thing and keeping it running, right? There's someone's getting a payoff somewhere. Same with Google. They add revenue, so targeting ads makes money, and that's just kind of the environment that the internet has kind of grown into. But in many places, particularly the US, it's perfectly legal, for example, for your ISP to collect your browsing history and then resell it. And say, well, I don't want you to collect my browsing history and resell it. Like, even if all I'm doing is looking at cat pics online, like that's nobody else's business but my own, right? So what?
Well, yeah. So with Facebook and Google, you are the commodity, right? Because
you're the product.
Yeah, you are the product. But on that note, though, like, even if you're looking at cat pics, so people say, well, I don't mind because I have nothing to hide because I'm just looking at cat pics. What would you say to that?
I get why people say that, and it all makes sense until something happens, and then it becomes a problem. So cat pics aren't exactly a very polarizing issue, but if what became an issue, right? If there was this worldwide debate, like cats versus dogs, and all of a sudden you're frequenting of cat pic sites, which yesterday was just fine, now suddenly that's of a lot of interest to people. And it's not so much they have anything to hide, it's more that it's no one else's business, right? Like, unless you choose to actually share that with people. And if you find some cool cat pics and you're sharing it with friends, no problem. But that's your choice, right? That's your business. And nobody else, in my opinion, should be able to come in to kind of take that and mine it and extract value from it. And I think that's where we have a lot of the issues these days, is where we've got these kind of two layers, where you have the user and the product, and you have this kind of like background layer that's kind of harvesting and making money from this. And a lot of people are fine with this. And again, cool, not a problem. If you're cool with it, great. But the nice thing about using something like a VPN is it just gives you some of that protection back. So when you're in, for example, like a coffee shop, the people in the coffee shop who are on the same Wi-Fi can't see that you're what you're browsing to, or who hosts your email, or the fact that you use WhatsApp or whatever. They can't see those sorts of things. And again, like when you go onto and you see this a lot with phones, like if you walk past a coffee shop that you visit a lot, you probably use their Wi-Fi. And as you're walking past, your phone detects the Wi-Fi and goes, "Oh, cool, free Wi-Fi," and it connects to the Wi-Fi. When it does that, of course, like the Wi-Fi is well aware that it's your phone. That they know, even if they don't know it's your device, they know it's a device they've seen before, and potentially they can track that between different stores of the same brand. There's a whole host of interesting things that they can do with that and try and tie things together. And for most of this stuff, though, it's not evil. It's not a conspiracy. It's business, right? It makes good business sense to know who you're selling to. It makes good business sense to target your ads, right? So before Google, if you had an ad, you would show it like 10,000 times, and maybe only one person or no people were even interested in that advert. Whereas what Google has done is made it so that you can target those ads. So not only are you getting more value from your advertising, but the people you're showing it to are getting more useful advertising. And then again, like Facebook takes it to the next level, and they include like social circles and marital status and all that sort of stuff.
So now it's like, for the consumer, it's like, hey, you're gonna see ads anyway, so might as well see something you like.
Yeah, I mean, for people who've kind of grown up in the Facebook world, ads like this are completely normal. Right? They've always been there. Just like, for example, I'm used to seeing adverts on TV. For me, they've always been there. But coming from the UK, what's really interesting is because all the BBC channels are kind of funded centrally. There's no adverts on those. So we always had this kind of contrast between the open advertisement sponsored stuff and like the paid stuff. But if you said so, no, but there's adverts on TV, no one's gonna be, oh well, that's odd, that's strange. So if you're brought up with it, it's just business as usual, right? You don't really see it as necessarily even a bad problem.
Right.
So it's only really where we've, in the last decade or so, where you've seen these like mega companies, that have grown and are based on this.
Yeah.
And if you look at like, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Google, like those are like the biggest companies on the planet. And they all have, their fingers in data and analysis
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
And perhaps that's why we have seen, VPNs become so popular as they are in the last 10 years also.
Yeah, I think people have got to the point where they may want protection, but they don't necessarily know how to get it, or they don't want to know what they're protecting themselves from. And I think we'll see this kind of evolution in the VPN space, where it goes from being you get a VPN to you get privacy protection. So you would basically find a provider that you trust, and they would be your one-stop shop for all the things that you care about. So rather than just kind of focusing on network traffic, which is really what a VPN does, you might have things that advert blocking or malware blocking, like parent protection and stuff like that. So I mean, these are all areas I think that are going to be quite interesting over the coming few years. I think there's going to be a big move in that space.
Cybersecurity as well, basically. So naturally, cybersecurity is like a hot topic, especially now. But how do you think, or how would you say the pandemic has affected the importance of cybersecurity for the common person?
I think it's brought it to the forefront. I mean, most people who aren't like tech people, they may interact with, say, Amazon or like an online supermarket or the bank, but that might be it. There may not be anything more that people use, particularly now with apps like Facebook and WhatsApp. Those kind of people live their lives around these apps, right? They kind of orchestrate the communication, the groups, and it all sits in one place. I think what the pandemic has done is, because all of a sudden all these different jobs and job roles that traditionally were done in the office now had to be done potentially from anywhere, and trying to understand, well, what makes sense there? How do we handle this? How do we manage it? Can we even manage this? And there was a lot of so for example, in Hong Kong, there's a very big emphasis towards literally rubber stamping things with a chop, right? They're kind of obsessed with stamping this thing. So you can sign it, but until you stamp it with a stamp that you can just buy for 50 cents anywhere, it's not legit. You've got to have that stamp. It doesn't matter that you've got like a digital ID card with all the fraud protection. If you've not got the rubber stamp, it doesn't count. But now when you're working remote and you've got 20 people and you have one stamp at the office, you have a new problem. How do you make that mechanism possible? How do you go from the physical to the virtual, and how do you secure that, right? Because what used to be people taking things from desk to desk or directly communicating, it's now done via email. It's done via file services and all that sort of stuff. How do you keep that secure, particularly when the people that need to use this aren't security experts, right? They're not going to have a background in what works and what doesn't work, right? They're not going to be used to handling targeted phishing emails. They're not going to be used to dealing with a whole host of scenarios that will come up from this. Historically, when someone was doing things from remote, they generally had a certain level of experience and knowledge in the stuff they were doing. And the pandemic has changed that. Now everybody needs to
precisely. It's like, sorry, it's like my in my past 18 months, I think my parents have never online shopped for groceries. It's like it's very common for us to be doing that, but someone like my parents or that that generation of people are also now getting, well, I wouldn't say forced, but used to it, just through circumstance. And I think that opens up a whole new different world of like possibilities for them, but also a whole new different world of dangers.
No, I agree. And it's like on TV, you have like there's certain standards for adverts, right? So you're not going to find blatant scams broadcast on national TV. If someone's sending you like scams in the mail, it's not going to take long for them to be picked up. And I found that for a lot of people, like they wouldn't be fooled by on the TV, they wouldn't be fooled by someone phoning them or by a letter. But when a little box pops up and says, "You have a virus, click me now to fix it," people click it.
Yeah.
Because they don't have that experience or that knowledge. Like they trust the system.
Yeah.
And they don't know that there's a whole host of things that that can be exploited that people just aren't aware of.
Yeah. I think it's a trust. It's an inherent trust in technology. Like if my computer is telling me that, it has to be right.
Yeah, I mean, for people like me, like I'm obviously like a tech person. I like the tech and I get the tech, but most people just use it. It's a tool, right? You turn the laptop on, you write your stuff, you do your stuff, you turn it off, right? It's just a tool to your daily work. So most people don't have this deep understanding of how this thing works any more than most people know exactly how the internal combustion engine in their car works, right? Or how the braking system works. So any of those things.
So how deep? But how deep does someone's knowledge need to be, Peter?
Honestly,
for someone who's working in like HR or marketing or like something like that,
Yeah, it's one of the nice things, if you can call it that, is like 90%, I'd say, of the stuff that's out there that you're likely to get hit by. There's some fairly basic tells that you can kind of pick up on. So you don't need to be an expert to stay safe. You just need to be aware. And that's always part of the problem, right? How do you get people to be aware of something that they don't know exists, right? So like, they're not going to search for things like, how do I protect against X online if they don't know that X exists? So that's kind of one of the challenges that that we face is, educating people on basic, what I call basically internet hygiene. There's certain things that you get taught, as a kid, right? When you go out to play outside by yourself. You're taught how to cross the road safely. You're taught to the old thing like stranger danger, all that sort of stuff. There's just a set of basic principles that you follow, and if you follow them, like most of the time, that's all you need. But there is a lot of work now being done in how to make this simpler and easier. Historically, it hasn't been a problem, right? Because it's tech people that have been doing it, and we're just used to the abuse. But now that you have tens of thousands of people that need the same level of protection, but don't have that background or the inclination to find out about it, you have things, as we were briefly discussing earlier, like the YubiKeys that are kind of created as very simple tools that can protect you against a lot of these attacks.
Yeah, actually, if you could talk a little bit more about those, and if you could just hold them up for us.
Yeah, so I mean, I've got so this is actually one of the latest ones, which you can't see because the magic background. But this is actually a YubiKey.
We see enough of it.
So this actually acts as it's a physical token, and you can kind of register this key with, say, like there's hundreds of websites that support it. It's an open standard, so anybody who wants to support it can. And the stuff physically on that key basically means that you're not going to suffer from phishing attacks, because the way the thing is set up, it also effectively checks, verifies the website for you. So whereas you could get sent like a link to your bank that looks legit but actually isn't, with this sort of setup, it will be able to it will know that it's not the right site, or at least your credentials won't work with the fake site, so you're protected against it.
Right.
And because even if you put your username in and your password in, the physical key then stops you kind of going the next step.
Yeah.
And if someone knows your username and password but they don't have the physical key, then there's nothing they can do with the account. So what's interesting with the YubiKey Bio, which I think was just released last week, it actually registers your fingerprint. So this is kind of moving along the path for passwordless login,
Yeah,
where
biometric.
yeah, so you normally you have touch to sign, which is what this is the YubiKey 5. This is kind of the standard one, and you can see like it has that there you go, has that metal contact,
Yes.
and that is literally just a capacitive, so you touch it, and it moves on to the next step. So when it goes to access the key, it just flashes, and you have to tap it to say, "Yep, I know why you're flashing. This is something I want to do. Please continue." And that requires someone to physically be there using the key, which is extremely valuable. But to prevent against, say, like someone breaking into your laptop remotely, and you're asleep, and all of a sudden your key is flashing away happily to itself, and unlocking all of your servers and things like that. With this really simple mechanism, if there's no one there to actually touch it, it's not going to work. So you kind of beat a whole host of attacks just with that.
Yeah.
But that key doesn't care who touches it. It just has to be someone touching it. Whereas the new one, the biometric one, will actually
Scan your fingerprint.
verify the fingerprint at the same time. So this is why the with the original YubiKey, it's kind of initially two factors. So okay, something which is your password, and then something you have, which is the physical YubiKey. And because all the private stuff never leaves the key, you've basically got to have that thing with you. Whereas now with the new BioKey, rather than it being a password that it's basically a fingerprint. So you still have to have this physical key, but it verifies who touches it. So the idea is that this can like make web platforms and things ultimately passwordless. So you would get a YubiKey or equivalent. Again, it's an open standard. These are great. They don't have any batteries in them. They don't seem to die. They're ridiculously robust. So you'd buy one of these things, and then you'd register with your bank or with Google or YouTube, whichever platform you're using. And then it recognizes this key, and then basically, unless someone has your physical key, they're not getting into that website. So it's getting to the point now where, like with Microsoft, when you set up like a live account, I think they now have it so that you don't actually need to have a password. You can delete the password if you have one of these registered. So there's no password to even get into the account anymore.
So look, Peter, I think cybersecurity experts all over the world for years have been trying to crack this age-old problem of like encryption and password management. Do you think with the BioKey we've finally getting closer to that, or finally managed to crack that?
I think it's getting to the point now where it's getting easy enough to do. I mean, these keys are still expensive, and the new BioKey, I think it's about $80 US. So we're not talking something that anybody is just going to casually go out and buy. But they do have the blue YubiKeys, which are basically the same thing as this, but without the biometric. So it goes with a password, and those are relatively low cost, especially if you're buying in bulk. So like a company might order a tray of these, or like a bank could manufacture them or something like that. But it has got to the point now where these things are simple to use. You just touch it. They're robust. They'll survive for years. We're definitely getting closer to it. And it's mostly people are bad with passwords.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why we've seen kind of an explosion. Things like password managers over the last 5 years or so. And are interesting.
I'm surprised ExpressVPN didn't come up with one.
I wouldn't be surprised to see one making an appearance. But interestingly, the key thing about a password manager, it's not so much about the security aspect of it, right? You can make this thing super, super secure, but unless it like integrates nicely into your iPhone or your Android device, and autofills your website so it just works, you're not going to use it. So the challenge there is how do I secure this thing so your passwords are safe, but how do I make it so that you'll actually use the thing? In the old days, you'd have like KeyPass, where you'd open it up and you'd go in, you'd search for the thing, you'd find it, you'd copy and paste it into your browser, and that used to be kind of acceptable. Now it's not, right? So if you say something like like 1Password or LastPass and things like that, when you go to a website, one, it usually identifies correctly which website it is, but it can pre-fill various forms for you. So some sites can actually fill in the form and then actually submit the form, so you just log straight in. So you kind of get this experience of not having to log in at all, but actually having a very secure platform. What's going to be interesting to see is these things worked by giving you like very long, complicated passwords for each account.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things that have caused people so many problems over the years is they have their favorite password, which they often tell people, and they use that for everything. So if someone, if a website has a data leak and you're using passwords in it, there's a list of websites that people will try with those account details, because there's a very high chance that you use the same username and password on PayPal or on Gmail or on Skype or any of these other services. And so the password managers help you there because it creates this insanely long password, but critically each one is different. So even if one account gets popped, it won't impact any of the others because they're all completely different. What's interesting is with something like a YubiKey, you shouldn't, but you could use the same password everywhere, and it wouldn't matter because you need the physical token to actually do anything with it. So even if the attacker knew all your credentials, unless they physically have the key, there's not much they can do about it. And these things basically have built-in like self-destruct effectively. After like a certain number of tries, it locks out. And so like you can reset it and do everything from scratch, but trying to recover the content it's just not realistic for it's not worth the trouble. You're better off just wiping it and selling the key than trying to spend your time trying to get anything off it. So I think we're going to be seeing this evolution as we're moving more and more away from people having to remember or people having to think about these things, and it just becoming something simple and packaged like a YubiKey, where you just plug it in, it pops up and says, please tap the key. You tap the key and you get logged in. So I think it's going to be, how do we make things simple so that people don't have to think about these things or be concerned with these things, but also do it in such a way that's actually secure. That's always the challenge, security versus usability.
Right. So Peter, we've been talking so much about like technology and everything related to it. So what would your advice be to someone who's actually starting out in the world of tech and really trying to break into it?
I think the main thing really is to be curious and just look around and see what's what's happening out there. If you look at any of the like security products, you'll see a whole host of things that kind of crop up, either for things like dealing with things like spam, dealing with ads, dealing with malware. All of these things are kind of extensions of a rather simple use case, right? So, for example, if you really want to get rid of, say, ads on websites, those ads are just loading content from websites like any other website is. There's nothing special about it being adverts apart from the fact you don't happen to like the content. And so a lot of the things that you need to kind of work with are just the same core principles, just applied slightly differently. The other thing that I think is really helpful for people who are particularly interested in the cybersecurity aspects of it is the mindset's quite different from when you're a programmer, and that's actually one of the things that does show up in the second game when you start doing a lot more with concepts. But the way a lot of people think about these sorts of challenges is, I'm fixing a bug in some software, right? Like there's a problem, I need to find it and fix it. The problem with that mentality is it's not a bug in software. There is somebody, who's basically the opposite of you, who is, thinking through what you're doing and looking to counter it, right? Exactly. So every time you come up with something new, they will come up with something new, and you'll come up with something new, and you'll kind of have this evolution.
One up each other, right?
Yeah, like and that's the way it's always been. It's an arms race effectively. But it's key to recognize that it's not, you're not just trying to fix a bug in a browser or write a product that just makes a small tweak. you're having big impact when you do this, and the
Yeah.
other person, or the other side, I should say, will respond because they have to.
Yeah.
So having this idea that you actually are going up head to head against, someone in a competition, again, like you do when you play the games.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's realistic. That is, you're up against someone who's actively trying to do the opposite that you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a very different. It's very different mindset from what a lot of people are used to, particularly they're coming from like a software background, or they've learned how to make websites or stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Getting into this mindset where someone's actively attacking or actively, making moves against you,
Yeah.
rather than just being some, mistake that's there or some weird bug that's floating around. Someone deliberately did this.
It's like playing
Getting
chess.
into that mindset is different. It's kind of, it's challenging, but once it's also kind of exciting as well, right? Because there can only be one winner in this competition,
Exactly.
and it's either going to be you or them. So
yeah,
you're pitting yourself against someone who has something to lose and who wants to win.
yeah,
And so like it's a nice way of testing your mettle, so to speak. But getting used to that mindset that things
Yeah.
are different. I think that would be my advice for people who are looking to get in cybersecurity, is to really think carefully about like what's on the other side of the equation, basically.
Yeah. So I guess in summary, Peter, what you're saying is buy our games.
Yeah, definitely. You need to buy these games. It's a realistic simulation.
Yeah, awesome. So I think the next thing that Potato Pirates needs to do is like doing a VPN expansion, I guess.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. We'd probably be up for that.
Nice. All right, guys. So we are exactly at the top of the hour, and this has been a pleasure, Peter, to be speaking with you. So again, just a couple of announcements. We have a link in the chat already for the giveaway. So we're doing a giveaway for our plushies, for all the character plushies we have in the games. You can also head over to ExpressVPN's website and get 3 months free if you sign up for a 1-year membership, because privacy is everybody's responsibility. And we also have 2 days left on our 10/10 sale that's happening on our website. We have a 20% off site-wide, so get that while you still can. And in closing, Peter, I really just want to thank you, for being here. And please follow Peter. Peter, where can people find you? Oh wait, I know this one. Peter's website, Peter's personal blog is d.engineer, right? So
Yep.
d.engineer. A great choice of a domain, by the way.
I was really excited when that was available.
So it's just d.engineer. To type that into your browser. Peter, what about socials? Can people find you on like Twitter or something?
Not so much at the moment. Mostly for the privacy focus. I just
Yeah.
don't tend to go there. I am on LinkedIn though, so if anyone's interested in talking about stuff from that aspect, then
Nice.
and they can find me there. And again, if anyone's actually like interested in doing working with the sorts of challenges that I'm working with, then again, reach out, because we're actively hiring. We're looking for people who are interested in this space. And critically, we're not expecting you to kind of come like with years of VPN experience. Would be nice, but it's still a very new field. What we're really looking for is people that are interested and are excited by this sort of thing, and want to get their hands into the thick of it.
Yeah, for sure. So you heard it, guys. The chief architect of ExpressVPN is hiring. so try and get that while you still can. And follow us on our socials. The links are right below our faces. And all right, so I think that's pretty much it. Thank you so much, Peter. This has been a pleasure once again.
No worries, it's been great.
And remember, everyone, get your copy of the Carbovian Sea Chronicles, which is the downloadable ebook resource, the single player mode of Battle Chips, because that not only features Peter Membrey but also his kids.
Yeah.
All right. Till next time. See you, everyone.
See ya.